Hey, welcome to our explainer. I want you to think about something for a sec. The last promise you made. Was it to a friend? Maybe a family member? Okay. Now what if I told you there's this really fine legal line that separates that promise from a full-blown binding contract? You know, the kind that could actually land you in court. Well, today, we're going to find that line.
So let's just dive right in with a question. Every promise you make, you promise a friend you'll grab coffee, you tell your boss, yep, I'll get that report done. Are those contracts, like real contracts?
Well, believe it or not, in the eyes of the law, the answer is a big, fat no. And the entire reason why it comes down to one single, super important legal concept that we're about to unpack. So, what is this mystery concept? In the legal world, they call it consideration. But trust me, the easiest way to wrap your head around it is to think of it as the price of a promise.
So, at its core, consideration is just the value that's given in return for a promise. It's what makes a deal a two-way street. It's that something each person puts on the table that flips a casual statement into a real, honest-to-goodness bargain. This is how the law sorts the serious deals from the empty promises.
Okay, so for this consideration thing to actually work, a court is looking for two key ingredients. You got to have both. First, there has to be something of legally sufficient value. And second, it has to be part of a bargained-for exchange. Both have to be there for a promise to stick. So what does legally sufficient value even mean? It's probably not what you think. It's way broader than just cash. It can be a promise to do something, or even a promise to stop doing something you have every legal right to do. That little move is called forbearance. And yeah, in the legal world, giving something up can be just as valuable as handing something over.
This right here is probably the clearest way to see it. A contract, that's a two-way street. There's that bargain for exchange. The promise is essentially bought. But a gift, that's a one-way street. There's no exchange. So if a promise isn't bought with some kind of consideration, the law just sees it as a gift.
All right, so that's the theory, right? But let's get to the fun part. We're going to look at some wild, real-world cases where what looked like a solid deal just fell apart. And it all came down to that one missing ingredient, consideration.
Okay, let's start with this one. It's a doozy. You've got basketball legend Allen Iverson, and he supposedly says to his friend Jameel Blackman, I'll give you 25% of any proceeds from the answer. Now, his friend was the one who suggested Iverson use that killer nickname in the first place. I mean, come on, that sounds like a sealed deal, right?
So think about it. The friend suggests the nickname. Iverson makes the promise. Seems totally fair. Why on earth would that not be a binding contract? What could possibly be missing?
The answer, and this is a big one in contract law, is something called past consideration. See, you can't bargain for something that's already in the past. Blackman gave him the nickname before the promise of money was ever made. So that act couldn't legally be the price for Iverson's promise. It was just a great idea he'd already given away for free.
Okay, let's try another one. This is a classic. Picture this. You've got a contractor. They're halfway through building an office. They've got a contract, a set price, and everything's going just fine. And then, all of a sudden, they stop working. They down tools and demand an extra $75,000 just to finish the job they already agreed to do. Now, the owner's in a serious bind, right? They need this building done. So, with their back against the wall, they agree.
But guess what? That new promise to pay the extra cash? Totally unenforceable. And the reason is this little thing called the pre-existing duty rule. Basically, you can't demand more money for something you are already legally required to do anyway. There's no new price for the promise, so no new deal.
All right, last one. And this one is subtle. Imagine your boss stands up and says, everyone's going to get a 10% bonus at the end of the year if management agrees. Pay close attention to that little phrase at the end. Does that little disclaimer matter?
Oh, you bet it does. It changes everything. This is what the law calls an illusory promise. It looks like a promise, it sounds like a promise, but it's really just smoke and mirrors. That phrase, if management agrees, means the company hasn't actually committed to anything. It's all up to them. It's an illusion, and so there's no consideration.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. Some of these rules seem kind of harsh, right? I mean, what about situations where sticking to the letter of the law leads to a really unfair result? Well, you're not wrong. And the law actually has a built-in escape hatch for situations just like that.
It's this really powerful legal tool called promissory estoppel.
It's basically the law's way of saying, look, even if there's no technical consideration here, we might enforce this promise anyway. And it does that if breaking that promise would be seriously, deeply unfair to someone who was counting on it. It's a safety net for justice.
Now, for a court to pull out this trump card, they have a pretty specific checklist they go through. 5 things have to be true. 1. Was there a clear and definite promise? 2. Should the person making it have expected the other person to rely on it? 3. Did they actually rely on it? 4. Did that reliance cause them some kind of major harm? And 5. Is enforcing the promise the only way to avoid injustice?
And look, this isn't just some dusty legal theory. In a case from our source material, a doctor and an ER promised a family he'd handle the insurance for a medevac flight. A court later said there was no consideration, so no contract. But, and this is huge, they said the case could go forward, and the big question they were asking was, could promissory estoppel apply here? Do the family rely on that promise and suffer because of it?
Okay, so let's bring this all back to you. Why does any of this legal stuff matter in your daily life? Because once you understand the idea of consideration, it fundamentally changes how you look at every promise, every handshake deal you're a part of.
So what's the big takeaway here? Let's break it down one last time. A simple promise isn't a contract. For that, you need a price. That's consideration. That price has to be part of a bargain for two-way exchange. Without it, a promise is really just a gift. But always remember, the law keeps that fairness exception in its back pocket for when justice absolutely demands it.
So I'll leave you with this question. After all this, think about your own life. How many of the so-called deals you've made look a little different now?